Daniel Ricciardo's move to McLaren in 2021 seemed a match made in heaven between a proven race winner hungry for a shot at the World Championship and a legendary team working its way back to being a contender. The reality has fallen dramatically short of that. Ricciardo struggled last year, but hopes things will be different in 2022 have so far proved wide of the mark. And now we are starting to see hints that his time with the team might not extend beyond the end of this season. Teammate Lando Norris is contracted until the end of 2025 and established as McLaren's spearhead. Meanwhile, Ricciardo has been searching for an elusive breakthrough that has yet to materialise that he needs to justify his high salary. Already, there are 3 warning signs that Ricciardo's time with McLaren might not extend beyond the end of the season. Speaking before the start of last season, Ricciardo revealed his McLaren deal would keep him at the team until at least the end of 2023. But over the past 15 months, Ricciardo has struggled to build up any momentum. He has had his moments, famously winning last year's Italian Grand Prix to end McLaren's long victory drought, but generally he has lagged behind Norris. After struggling to 12th place in the Spanish Grand Prix, Ricciardo offered what appeared to be a hint that his McLaren future might not be as clear-cut as he once thought. Asked the question, "Have you and the team started talking about next year?" by F1 journalist Dieter Renken, Ricciardo responded that he expected talks before the summer break. Ricciardo's answer piqued the race's interest. So we then asked him why such talks were necessary given what he had said last year about a 3-year deal. It elicited an interesting response, with Ricciardo unusually evasive, then declining to say much. His response was that we made him answer something he did not need to, making the unconvincing suggestion he was talking about summer 2023. He then understandably said he was going to leave the topic alone and avoid any further comment. Ricciardo was perhaps wise not to elaborate further. While this might only have been a driver who had just spent over an hour and a half struggling in sweltering conditions during a Grand Prix, misspeaking, it does appear to suggest that McLaren and Ricciardo will indeed have talks about their future soon. What's more, McLaren CEO Zak Brown told Sky Sports F1 the day after the race that Ricciardo was falling short of expectations. Although he stressed both driver and team would continue to work hard to try and get things to click, that's another indication that this can't go on. None of this is anything like conclusive proof Ricciardo could be heading for the exit, but it's only logical for McLaren to consider whether it might be time to cut its losses for 2023. There's still time for things to turn around for Ricciardo, and it's possible that a return to his electric best is round the corner. But the clock is ticking, and time appears to be running out. Let us know in the comments if you think McLaren should stick with Ricciardo, or if it's time for a change. The hope was that Ricciardo's difficulties in adapting to the McLaren in 2021 would be put behind him this year. He spent last year deconstructing his driving and enhancing his technical understanding, working closely with race engineer Tom Stallard. That offered a tantalising prospect of Ricciardo not only being back to his brilliant best, but potentially being better than ever before. With major rule changes transforming the cars, the stage appeared set for Ricciardo once again to show the form that earned him 8 Grand Prix wins and made him arguably the best driver in F1 in both 2014 and 2016. But the first 6 races of 2022 have looked the same as much of 2021. Ricciardo is 39-11 down in terms of points scored compared to Norris and has only been ahead of his teammate once in the 4 races both have finished. And that, in Bahrain, was the consequence of Norris's failed strategic gamble on a weekend when McLaren was miles off the pace. In qualifying, Norris has been ahead 5 times out of 6, and on the one occasion when Ricciardo beat him, in Spain, this was thanks to Norris having his final Q2 lap time deleted for a track limits violation. Before he lost that lap for a breach that wouldn't have conferred much, if any, lap time advantage, Norris had been 0.310 seconds faster. Given Norris was suffering from a visibly debilitating bout of tonsillitis, it was another disappointing qualifying performance for Ricciardo, and things got worse in the race. He finished 12th, with his race pace nowhere near Norris. They ran similar strategies, with 3 stints on softs and 1 on mediums, albeit with Ricciardo using his mediums in the second stint and Norris the third. But the average lap time difference, eliminating outliers, was over 0.8 of a second. Ricciardo simply could not extract any pace from the car. That's out of proportion with the pace deficit that Friday and Saturday appeared to indicate existed between the pair. Ricciardo was baffled by the fact he was operating at a lower level of grip than everyone and hoped a problem would be uncovered to explain it. McLaren is still investigating, and given how big a struggle Ricciardo had in the race, it would be a surprise if some problem wasn't found. While Ricciardo said there were little bits here and there in terms of differences between his and Norris's setup, it was not anything that could explain such a big gap. But if McLaren finds a reason for Ricciardo's struggles, that won't change the overall performance pattern. He has not produced the speed expected by McLaren, the watching world, or even Ricciardo's own illustrious history in F1. His problems of last year were well documented, with the style he'd honed in previous years in F1 not working well with a car that didn't offer him the desired characteristics on turn-in. He worked hard to reprogram his style with some success, but never to the point where he recaptured his old form. While the fundamental change of the cars offered the tantalising prospect of a reset, the inherent characteristics don't necessarily favour Ricciardo. With front-end load tricky to produce for slower corners, the change is perhaps not well timed. Ricciardo admits, "I want to execute more perfect laps, and there's still not enough of those." The impression is of a driver who can't find a way back to his old heights, and although it's always impossible to know what might be going on in someone else's head, perhaps he's asking himself if he has the ability or the determination to do so. Should Ricciardo leave, McLaren has several obvious options for the seat alongside Lando Norris, who is contracted to the team until the end of 2025. First and foremost among those is IndyCar star Colton Herta. The 22-year-old has a testing contract with McLaren and is due to get mileage in a 2021 specification McLaren Mercedes MCL 35M this year. That's as part of his driver development deal with the team, which was announced in March. He's also a contender for possible free practice outings later in the season, although McLaren has yet to confirm its plans for the 2 FP1 sessions it must run a rookie driver in. Herta is seen by McLaren as a serious option. He combines genuine ability, as his brilliant save on slicks in damp conditions on his way to a stunning victory in the IndyCar road course race at Indianapolis earlier this month showcased, with big potential and the backing of a burgeoning American F1 fanbase. He's also already flirted with F1, performing well in the Alfa Romeo simulator ahead of a planned FP1 run in the United States Grand Prix last year, before Michael Andretti's bid to take over the team for 2022 collapsed. He's also slated to drive for Andretti's mooted startup F1 team should it come together, although a place with an established team like McLaren would surely appeal more. But he's not the only option. Arrow McLaren SP IndyCar driver and former Red Bull junior Pato O'Ward drove for McLaren in the Abu Dhabi Young Driver Test in December and has also been linked to an F1 shot. He's close to agreeing a new IndyCar deal to stay with McLaren, but the possibility of a switch cannot be ruled out. There are also alternatives elsewhere in F1. AlphaTauri driver Pierre Gasly has been linked to McLaren should he not be given a return to Red Bull racing next season. He's been a strong performer with Red Bull's B team in recent years, winning the 2020 Italian Grand Prix, although his difficult half-season spell alongside Max Verstappen at Red Bull might count against him. McLaren has also taken an interest in reigning Formula 2 champion Oscar Piastri. Although under contract to Alpine, he has ties to McLaren as one of the 4 drivers in its reserve driver pool. Other drivers could be on McLaren's radar depending on what happens elsewhere in F1's driver market, but it means there are alternatives to Ricciardo should team and driver decide they should part company. It's still possible Ricciardo could stay with McLaren in 2023, and he would continue to do a perfectly respectable job as Norris's number 2. But McLaren signed him, and pay him, to be far more than that.